Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Three-Man Weave, brought to you by VanquishTheFoe.com. My name is Keith Schertz. I'm at CougarCast on Twitter, and tonight from DC, Steve Pierce.
Hello, gentlemen. How are you on this most dark of occasions?
Not doing very well, and also sent it out to California, coast to coast, and we have Jake Welch.
Jake, are you alive?
It's how I feel too. I'm speechless.
I don't know. He looks frozen in a glass case of emotion, which I don't know if is really a glass case of emotion or is just his technology failing him, because I think he is, once again, as he was on Saturday night, on a church Wi-Fi system. So
there's a chance that there's going to be problems there for him. So, well, Steve, so they lose to Gonzaga. Not a huge surprise, right?
Not a huge surprise, but still disappointing, right?
Sure, of course. I think that this game was not played on BYU's terms the whole way, and you know what? They valiantly kind of hung in there and gave themselves an opportunity to kind of hang around. And I just thought, for a team that wasn't playing the game on their terms or anything like that, they were able to actually kind of do a relatively good job of surviving.
Yeah, it's you know, I thought that it wasn't a bad loss, right? I mean, Gonzaga is a top 10 team. They were in the top 5 until we beat them 10 days ago. A loss to Gonzaga is A, not the end of the world, and B, not a bad loss at all. And I think BYU looked like they belonged the entire time. They kept getting in holes, and every time I thought they were going to be in a hole and they couldn't dig out of it, they'd dig out of it, and they'd get to 3 points, and then eventually they pushed it to 2 points. They just could never fully get over the hump. But they played really well, and so I was proud of the way they played, although disappointed that obviously they couldn't pull off the win, because I did feel like I know that they can beat this team because we've seen it before.
Absolutely, and I think with the stakes, of course, being conference tournament champions and all the history of being horrible in conference tournaments and all of those things, I really was hoping they'd be able to kind of get that monkey out of the way and move on from it. But we still get to live with that, so that's fun.
We do. Another year. I think Jake is alive again. Jake, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm dialing in from my phone because my computer is dead. Can you guys see me?
We can see you.
Oh, this is great. I have no idea what I look like, but I'm sure I'm very jovial. I'm just so happy I get to talk to you guys about this loss. But yeah, it's a tough one, and it was a very physical game. And I don't know how you're supposed to guard someone without kind of being a little bit more physical when they're as large as they are. So anyway, we can continue with the whatever. I was just jumping in quite mid-sentence with you guys. So.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I think that's an interesting place to start. I know a lot of people are upset with or a little disenchanted with the way this game was being called, including Coach Dave Rose. And before we get into kind of the specifics of that, I actually want to talk about that technical foul, your thoughts on it, and the escalating actions that sort of, I mean, that was unlike anything we've seen in the last decade from Dave Rose.
Yeah, he got really mad. Like, he really went like Hulk on it. Like, the coordination on the jacket rip off and throw down onto the chair was beautiful. It was like watching Swan Lake performed by the greatest ballerinas in the world, except if those ballerinas were exceptionally angry 62-year-old men. But he got really mad, and he was heated from the beginning. And I think that the announcers were under the impression that he was mad about that specific call where Ty didn't get the foul when they blocked his jump shot and then the ball went out of bounds. He was mad at about 4 plays before that when Karnofsky didn't get called on a foul on Collinsworth on the drive. And it had you could have seen it had been building all game, and that was kind of the point where the levee broke, and all of the Dave Rose Hulk anger came rushing in, and it was a sight to behold. I think it did give BYU a little passion and energy. They came out of that technical foul situation and played really well for a few minutes.
I think it also came on the heels of, you can't touch Karnowski, but he can certainly touch you. I just thought that was one of the things, 5 or 6 fouls that were called on the big guys, and Karnowski just could do whatever he want. And, Isaac Nielsen tries to stop him from getting possession beneath, and now they whistle him because he initiates contact at the free throw line. They were freaking out about Karnowski, and one of the things I wanted to say about that, though, is Karnowski only did things against Isaac Nielsen. And we've seen all year that everybody can do things against Isaac Nielsen.
Yeah. I don't know if it was just Isaac, though, because, Isaac wasn't at the time. And
Luke.
Yeah, I think when he really went on the roll and scored like 4 baskets in a row, it was Isaac for the most part. But the only reason he didn't score 8 baskets in a row is because Ryan Andrus and Luke Worthington just fouled the crap out of him on the previous 4 possessions before he could even make a move. So I think it was a pretty equal opportunity abuse. I was just shocked that Rose didn't bring the double earlier. They doubled Karnowski went on the catch every time he caught on the block in Spokane pretty much all game. And it worked, and they obviously won the game. It's a risky maneuver, right? Because if you bring that double, you leave yourselves open to leaving the perimeter open, opening up three-point shooters on the kickout, which requires you to have to rotate really quickly to cover it well, which we know BYU doesn't rotate particularly well.
Gonzaga went 8 for 12 from the three-point line tonight.
Yeah, so it was kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? If you don't double Karnowski, then he scores at will, as we saw. If you do double Karnowski, you potentially leave open a shooter, and they shot really well tonight. So, I don't know what you do. I generally take away the layup and then pray with the 3, but I don't know. I guess I can't second guess Dave Rose there.
Yeah, it's a really tough situation because I think in the first half they only missed 1 3-point shot the entire half. So I think kind of going into that second half they were probably a little bit hesitant to bring on the double team there. So yeah, you're right. It's tough to make that call either way. Kind of going back to the point though with Dave Rose, I think everyone really loves the fact that he does get a little bit heated. But the 3 times that BYU has had a technical foul in a game, at least the 3 times that I've been paying attention, they've lost every single one of those games. I remember Steve and I were down in San Diego when Chase Fisher got, I don't know, it wasn't a technical or if it was a flagrant one.
Yeah.
But after that, the tide kind of shifted and San Diego went on a run. And then the other time when Dave Rose got a technical this year, BYU, also lost that game. And so while I want to say it's like, oh yeah, it's great, it gets, probably gets the players fired up and stuff. We're giving up a couple points in that situation, maybe losing, probably not losing momentum, but I don't know. I just don't, as far as, the direct correlation between, the number of technical fouls that we've had and the number of losses that we've had, it's not, an exact science there, but, it's interesting to relate because I think people, generally the fans on Twitter, reacted so positively to it. People are, after debating the merits of Bronco Mendenhall getting as much fire, during the football games, they want to see, the same thing out of Bronco on the football field. So I don't know. It definitely is an interesting thought, though, and obviously, we lost the game, so there's that.
I think the difference with the football is that the football team gets like the football equivalent of a technical foul like 14 times a game with all those personal foul penalties. So I think they've got enough fire. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Tejan Karoma, he's doing enough as it is. It would have been great. I think Zach Bloxham noted earlier that it would have been fantastic if he would have just showed up, put on a basketball jersey, and battled with Karnowski down below. That would have been a fun sight to see.
Generally speaking, I don't like it when people blame referees. I'm not a big fan of that. Generally speaking, I don't like putting things on the refs. I like putting them on players and coaches. But tonight, free throw disparity, Gonzaga took 37 of them, BYU took 20. Is there, if there is possibly a time to gripe about it, is there a possibility to complain about that tonight, or would it be justified? Obviously, people could complain.
No. I don't think so. And I do recognize the foul disparity, but at the same time, we have to decide, were the fouls that were called legitimate? because BYU did foul a lot more than Gonzaga, and I think a lot of that is symptom of them just not being able to handle Gonzaga down low. They chose to foul rather than to let Karnowski get a shot off. They didn't move their feet well on the perimeter, and so they got caught reaching as guys went by them, particularly Chase Fisher a couple of times that I can remember where he just got blown by. He was not good tonight, by the way, with the exception of about 2 minutes at the beginning of the half. So, there were bad calls, but there's bad calls both ways in every game. And the WCC officials, in my mind, are really equal opportunity offenders of horribleness. Gonzaga shot a lot more free throws. I think BYU played pretty crappy defense a lot of time, particularly down low, and just didn't have an answer, and so they fouled. And that's what inferior teams do when they don't have an answer. They foul, and that puts their team on a free throw line.
And it was kind of the nature of each game, too, as well. I mean, with Gonzaga, it was they got a guy in the post and he was taking shots, as opposed to BYU, we were attacking from the outside in, and we had guys driving to the basket. And it just seemed like the refs weren't as privy to calling the fouls of, okay, Collins was driving to the basket, and there might be some contact on the way up, as opposed to, some guys got it down low and he's, in the post, and clearly it's, people being a little bit more physical there. So, and it just seemed like they were, calling the post fouls as opposed to the drive fouls a little bit more tonight. And that's not saying one way or the other. That's just the nature of BYU's offense. Both teams were attacking just in a little bit different way, and maybe that's why there was a little bit of disparity there. So we can't obviously we've been saying, you can't put it on them. There's a lot of things that we could have done so much better tonight. And yeah, it's easy in the moment to get really heated. I even do it on a very regular basis. Anyone follows me on Twitter, they know that I'll, follow Steve's lead in adding a all caps rage on something, but
I never do that.
What?
Not me.
Never. You always use very articulate way of speaking.
Lowercase all the time.
All lowercase. But now that the game is over and we've had some time to simmer and think about it in a very level-headed manner, I can say that there were plenty of opportunities for BYU to step up and change the tide in this game, and it was not on the referees.
Yeah, how many layups and putbacks did BYU miss tonight? I would love to go look at the Synergy stats where they can kind of show us where the shots were missed from and see the shot chart. Because Kyle Collinsworth had to miss, and a lot of them were contested, and maybe you could have said he should have got the foul call on those. But Kyle Collinsworth probably missed 7 or 8 layups. Josh Hart missed 2 putbacks. Kafusi missed a couple putbacks. You make 75% of those. And this is a different ball game, right? So it's ultimately players got to play, and that's BYU didn't make the plays tonight, and that's not good nor bad. Gonzaga's a really great team, and sometimes you lose to really great teams. It was great that they beat a really great team, but putting it all on the referees, it just doesn't sit right with me, even if they were bad.
I think the fun stat that we need to be able to track tonight and go back and see was how many times did Frank Bartley dribble the ball directly off of his foot.
Bartley.
He needs to go back to dribbling and just working on bouncing the ball off of the ground and not off of his appendages.
Look, I love the kid. I'm sure he's a nice kid, and he's, I'm sure, a very competent basketball player in most situations. But tonight, that kid was in over his head, and Dave had after the first 3 minutes he was in the game, Dave had no business putting him back on the floor. He just had no idea what he was doing. He did nothing positive. And I would have loved to see Dalton Nixon if you really were looking for more athleticism from your 4 position. I would love to see Jake Toulson, who he did try, and who I thought played well but didn't really get any shots off, which if he's not going to get shots off, why is he on the floor?
I think he's a good passer. Just I'll put that in.
I do think he's an underrated passer. I'm a big Jake Toulson fan. I would like to see more Jake Toulson, but this is where not having Anson Winder really hurts you, right? Because if Anson's healthy, Frank doesn't play. Anson gets those minutes. And even if it's shell of his former self, Anson, who we've seen over the last few weeks because injuries are terrible and they just will wear you down and he just hasn't been the same player, that's still better than what you got from Frank tonight. So that's kind of what you get when you have a main player like Anson go down. And then we saw at the end of the game, we may be without Skylar Halford, which is probably the biggest development from this game. If Skylar Halford really is hurt. They're saying it's a lower leg nerve contusion, which I have no idea what that means. Maybe the doctor will chime in on Twitter at #3MW. But if Skylar Halford can't go next week in the NCAA tournament, and I am saying that they're probably going to be in the NCAA tournament, barring something weird happening, that's a big problem. Because if you don't have Anson and you don't have Skylar, it starts getting real rickety the farther you go down the bench. So that's something.
Jordan Ellis, 2015. Jordan Ellis, here he comes.
Jordan Ellis. I love you, Jordan Ellis, but I don't want you playing in the NCAA tournament.
The one thing I know about Jordan Ellis is if we need a long baseball pass at the end of the game, apparently he's the guy for that. We've subbed him in twice in that scenario. So anyway, nerve contusion is a bruise, I guess a nerve bruise, and I'm assuming it's on the lower leg.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. So, that's what Rubel has said.
Dead leg
nerve contusion.
That's
dead
just
leg.
Dead leg.
Yeah, dead leg.
It was like in a really weird spot because he was holding his shin, and so like I don't know. It looked really bad. He wasn't putting any pressure on it. It was good that he could like move his knee normally because it wasn't a knee. Maybe it's like a bad high ankle sprain, which those can linger for weeks. Those are the worst. But maybe it is just like a weird bruise. I don't know. Hopefully he can play through it because this team really needs Skylar Halford. He made a lot of really big shots, and I didn't have it down the stretch. Missed some shots, but everyone missed some shots down the stretch when they were trying to come back. But he kept him in it for a long time with some really big three-point shooting, particularly in the first half. So they need him desperately.
On the Twitter, using #3MW, you can submit your questions. Please do. We'd love to talk about them. Brett Hine at Behind3. He said this is the first loss BYU's had this season when winning the rebound battle provide consolation. When I first read that, I had to go out and look. It's true. We're +5 on rebounds tonight. That actually emboldens me going forward for the next game. It's rebounding is, as you wrote about really nicely, Steve, has been a huge problem for BYU, and so for me, you should feel a little bit better given the fact that they were still able to outcompete and out-rebound considering the huge advantage they had in the big guys.
Yeah, it's interesting that this is the first time that they lost, and in that article that you referenced, Keith, I put together kind of a linear equation that would predict it. If you would have told me what the rebounding margin was in a BYU game, I could predict through this formula pretty successfully what the final outcome would be. And if you would have told me, according to this formula, that BYU won the rebounding battle by 5, the formula would have expected BYU to win the game by around 10 points. That formula has been pretty true to form all year long, and that's really a representation of how important rebounding is to BYU's success. Today they did rebound. But obviously they didn't win by 10 points. They lost by 15 or whatever it was.
Shot making. It's just they shot 40% from the field.
Yeah.
Tonight.
Yeah. They did the rebounding part, but they fell down on the other things where they normally don't have a problem. They didn't make shots. They gave up a pretty good percentage of shots of makes to Gonzaga. So it's tough, and they did what they needed to do on the boards, but I just don't think they could get stops, and they couldn't score like they used to, like they're used to, particularly when Tyler went out with foul trouble, Chase wasn't hitting, Kyle missed a lot of layups. It was just a tough night.
So Steve, what you're saying is that your formula, much like the BCS formula, is completely false and does not hold up always. And that's not true. I know the rebound formula holds true, but it's interesting to see that.
Math is a lie, Jake. Math is a lie. Don't listen to what the educators say.
I'm just like thinking about what is this gonna? I'm sure there's a think piece about Common Core on Slate right now that I could go read. That'd be really relevant to this conversation, but I'm not going to reference that at all. No, very interesting though. But I'm trying to think back about second chance points as well, because I felt like there were quite a few of those, maybe tip outs and stuff that Gonzaga would hit a 3 or something like that. But you're right. Gonzaga was just hitting those open looks. Anytime Wilcher, that guy does not. If you want to talk about people who are not athletic, that guy. He can get up and get a putback dunk every once in a while, but when he shoots, he can fit maybe 2 sheets of paper underneath his feet when he gets his jump shot off, because that's all he's getting there. But that's what if you give him time to set up and shoot. Same thing with Gary Bell Jr. I mean, I didn't think he even played in this last game when BYU played them, but he was all over the place tonight, scoring the ball. And so when you give those guys opportunities just to get their feet set, they're going to make those shots. And that's what they did. I mean, looking back at that game against Gonzaga, we had such great pressure defense, and they weren't able to find those holes in the zone and in the man defense that we were bringing. And so it just seemed like a completely different game where they were just said, okay, everything that we did in this last game against BYU, we're going to put that behind us, and we're going to find ways to just attack them instead of being attacked. And, that's kind of how it went out.
You really can't say enough about how Gonzaga played tonight. Wilcher, who's playing hurt as well, he was unbelievable. And some of those shots he made were just ridiculous. Like, the guy is a cyborg. The one where he had Haas essentially in the high post, and he faked Haas up, went underneath Haas, and hit like this weird leaning bank shot from about 15 feet. What do you do with that?
Yeah,
like, that's just an unbelievable shot by an unbelievable basketball player. The three he hit, where he kind of stepped behind the screen from about 25 feet, like, there was guys out there. Nothing. He just stepped out farther, and it was nothing but net. So, yes, does BYU need to get out farther and challenge those shots as much as they can? Yeah, but at the same time, like, Gary Bell Jr. made a lot of great shots tonight. Kevin Pangos in the second half made a lot of great shots. Those are just great basketball players playing great team basketball and finding each other. And so Gonzaga, I mean, it's hard to beat Gonzaga. They're a really great team. They're really deep. I think they're going to go deep in the tournament. So, I mean, there's nothing to feel bad about in that loss. It's just, great players doing great things, and sometimes you come up on the losing end. I think BYU fought well, all things considered.
I am not sad that that's the last time I have to see BYU play Kevin Pangos or Gary Bell Jr. I'm very glad. I'm very glad that that's over. I don't have to hear about how Steve Nash texts him. Anyway, I'm really glad to be done with those guys. Good grief, and good riddance.
But don't worry, we have so many more years of Sabonis, right? Yeah. And Karnowski. I mean, I'm sure he's going to be back again next year. Yay!
All right, let's go back to the Twitter. This is for it's only tagged you, Jake, and you, Steve, not me. So I won't give my thoughts. It's would love this is from the Sports Bros. Would love to hear your thoughts on Kaufusi's play, and then apparently the Sports Bros thoughts on it is that he was giving up position down low, fouling, etc. So thoughts on Corbin Kaufusi's play from you guys?
Yeah. Well, I mean, look at it this way. Before we say anything about tonight, Corbin's come an exceptionally long way. From where Corbin was in December to where Corbin is today, he's a different basketball player, and that's, he's been really tremendous the last few weeks, and a big part of why BYU's been so hot and been so successful. That being said, as good as he was in Spokane 10 days ago, and he was really, really good, he was just about as bad tonight. He looked really overmatched. I don't know if Karnowski was just taking the night off, on 10 days ago when we played in Spokane, or if, maybe Corbin was just really locked in that day. I don't know what the deal was there, but he looked badly outclassed today. Got in early foul trouble in both halves, actually. As the Sports Bros said, did cede low post position really, really badly. Particularly at the beginning of the second half, I think when the Karnowski train really started rolling was when BYU was essentially letting him catch on the block, or even closer to in the block.
Wasn't he in? He wasn't in the game though for that peried, wasn't he?
He was at the very beginning. The very beginning of the half.
He picked up the foul. Yeah.
Yeah, he picked up the fouls because Gonzaga came out of the half and went directly to Karnowski in two of their first three possessions, I think. And Corbin picked up that third foul because he let Karnowski catch deep in the post, had nothing he could do except to foul him. And then it continued from there. Isaac did the same thing. Ryan did the same thing. So letting Karnowski or even Sabonis catch that deep in the post, that is death. You are asking for death. And they did it multiple times. They figured it out a little bit as the half went on, and they started to push him out farther, and that was when they really started bringing the hard double from the guard down, and that worked, but to at least make him go with the ball. But then you open up a whole other host of problems with the perimeter and open threes. So it was like I said, damned if you do, damned if you don't. But yes, it was not a good night for Corbin. Lots of fouls, not great defense, not a great impact on offense, but he's young. He'll learn, and he'll get better. There's nothing but excitement in my mind for how Corbin Kaufusi can be from here on out, so this is just a blip on the way up.
Jake, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's like Steve said, we've seen a lot of progress from him, but he just wasn't able to get in sync tonight. There was no kind of rhythm to his game, offensively or defensively. I mean, the last game against Portland, he had those first few possessions. He was able to kind of get a good feel for the game offensively, have those nice buckets down inside, and then on defense, he would have. I think he had a couple nice blocks and whatnot. He just didn't seem to get the flow of the game this time around, and with a big guy like Karnowski, who's just kind of pushing you around, using his body weight and everything. It's just real tough to kind of get into the flow of the game. And I mean, we were going in and out too because of fouls. At the very beginning of the half, he came in, and then one of the very first possessions of the second half, picked up a foul. Luke came into the game. He just wasn't able to really catch a rhythm. So I think that he's going to be able to, learn from these opportunities. He's a freshman. He's got 3 more years of BYU basketball ahead of him, which is just a fantastic thought. And so it's just tough. In this game, you're playing against a post player who's just, far superior in his experience and just his feel for the game in that sense. So tough game for Corbin, but I think that, he can use this, and hopefully, going into the tournament, he'll be able to kind of say, all right, I'm not going to face anyone who's 7 foot, 7 foot whatever, 300 pounds whatever. So that's good. Maybe use that as a positive.
The good thing for all of us and for Corbin is that he's a 7 foot tall Groucho Marx without a mustache. He looks just like Groucho Marx without a mustache. I've thought it all year, and I always think to myself, this morning I shot an elephant in my pajamas. How it got in my pajamas, I'll never know. But no, anyway, Corbin Kaufusi, he'll develop, and he's been great. He's actually been one of the keys to why they've been hot down the stretch this year. Like, the reason they went 8-2 down the stretch and got the win in Spokane was because of Corbin. And so consistency is the hardest thing to develop, and so we're waiting for that. We're waiting for that from a couple other guys too on the team. I thought Fisher is a guy that, when Chase Fisher really gets it rolling, BYU can beat anybody. I really feel that way, and we hope that we'll see more consistency out of them. Okay, let's talk then. Firmly on the bubble once again. Everyone's checking what Joe Lenardi has to say, and apparently he has us at 65th still, so the top of the last 4 in, like we were before anyway. I've already gone on to say I think they're in. Because I think the West Coast Conference is a good conference, and it should be a 2-bid league, and I think that BYU is the second best team in the conference. So I think beyond that, they're just I think this is a good team. So I think they're in. Anybody else, though, nervous as we wait for Selection Sunday?
I don't think you can be totally confident at this point because obviously anything can happen. But based on what we've seen the last few years and how we know Dave Rose schedules, and he schedules the same way every year, and how the tournament committee responds to those schedules and responds to the type of resumes that come out of Dave Rose's schedules, they respond pretty well. And every year the prognosticators are like, oh, we're not quite sure about BYU. They're going to be the last ones in. And then last year they got a 10 seed with Kyle Collinsworth out for the year with an ACL injury. So I'm with you, Keith. I think they probably are in. I think they probably are outside of they're probably in with a bye, not playing in those first 4 games. That would be my thought. I don't know particularly. So I'm operating on the assumption that they are. The best thing, I know people don't have great opinion of, BYU doesn't have a lot of top 50 wins. They only have the one over Gonzaga. They lost to, San Diego and Pepperdine, who, they're, in the top, in the RPI 100 to 150 range. So, yeah, there's problems on their resume. But the thing about bubble teams is that they're bubble teams for a reason. There's problems on everybody's resume, and everybody's got a lot of basketball left to play where they can do more stupid things. So based on how BYU acquitted themselves this weekend, I think they really passed the eye test. I think that matters a lot to the committee. Even if necessarily statistical guys like me think it shouldn't, they should just look at the numbers and the math, even though math is a lie, as I said earlier. But the committee really, and Tom Holmoe has said this, they really do watch a lot of games, and they really do look at how do teams look. And these past few days, or particularly against Portland, and particularly tonight against Gonzaga, and then the Gonzaga game 10 days ago, BYU has looked like an NCAA tournament team down the stretch. If the committee is watching, and they are, and they watch a BYU game, they see a team that looks like they belong in the tournament. Like, if you're the NCAA tournament, you want them in the tournament because they're going to draw eyeballs because they play a fun style. So I think they're in. That's the long and short of it.
All right, so one of the other things, I just wanted to turn off the lights when you go.
Yeah.
Lock the door, brother Welch.
Yeah, make sure you take care of that building. But no, one of the things that I was going to say is I think if you're on the committee, one of the questions that they ask themselves is this a team that could pull off a win in the tournament? And I think if you look at that BYU team, I don't see how you could not come to the conclusion that, yes, they could probably win a game. Now, history indicates that BYU's not so likely to necessarily win a game. But anyway, that was one of the big thoughts I have. That really will play to BYU's advantage. That's just a fun way of looking at. I think that's what they mean when they say the eye test. Could this team win a game? And I think certainly BYU could.
Yeah, no, you hear a few of the national pundits kind of talking as they watch BYU's games, and it's like the Pat Forties and some of these SI riders and whatnot. Most of them will say, "Hey, man, BYU's looking pretty good." They said that the other night against Portland, and even tonight it was a really back and forth game in the first half. Gonzaga made some runs. BYU was able to match it a few times. In the second half, they weren't one specific time, but it was still a competitive game. And even though if the eye test should not be the ultimate decider, I think a lot of them are going to go into it saying, okay, as of right now, like Steve said, in the past few days, they're playing pretty good basketball. I mean, I was surprised last year, particularly with Kyle Collinsworth's injury, that we got into the tournament because, if you take a team like that and you take away Kyle Collinsworth, they're not going to be able to, perform at a tournament, level and be able to win a game. So if you factor in what happened last year and the fact that we lost one of our best players, still got in and got that type of a seed, I would say I'm incredibly optimistic that we're getting in. But like Steve said, I mean, for all we know, Boston College could storm through the ACC tournament and win the darn thing and get a bid. We just don't know. But I mean, there's a chance that Penn State could come through and win the Big Ten tournament. So there's chances of some weird things happening. But I would put it on. If I'm going to put a percentage on it, I'd say that I am 87% confident.
That's a good number. I was born in 1987, so I appreciate that.
There it is for you, Steve.
All right, so I mean, what seeding? I mean, so we're all pretty hopeful. Sounds like. What seeding do you expect the Cougars to be able to pull out?
I think they're going to be a 10. That's what I think. Maybe. I mean, this is. I mean, every year is different. Every tournament stacks up differently. Every field stacks up differently. Every bubble is different. So it's hard to compare across years. But this BYU resume is just about the exact same. A few differences here and there, but for the most part, the resume is pretty comparable to what it was last year. They got a 10 last year without Kyle Collinsworth. So you offer for some fluctuation, different year, different teams, different resumes in the mix. I say they're still probably about a 10, maybe an 11. What I really don't want, and this might sound counterintuitive, I don't want them to jump up to an 8 or 9. I don't think that they will now after they lost Gonzaga. Maybe if they would have beat Gonzaga, they could have got up to an 8 or 9. The problem with being an 8 or 9 is that if you win that first game, which is essentially a toss-up, you have to play a 1 seed. And I think there's a significant drop-off in the quality of teams from the 4 1 seeds that we're kicking around to those 2s. I think the 2s that you're going to play if you're in the 7-10 matchup and you win, the teams that are going to be sliding those 2 seeds are much easier to beat, i.e., they obviously won't beat Gonzaga because of how the rules of how the tournament is seeded, but teams like Gonzaga. BYU can beat teams like that. Can they beat Duke and Kentucky and Wisconsin? Maybe not. So I would like to see them stay at a 10 or an 11. And I think that, BYU, as has been said by multiple national commentators over the last few days, BYU is the type of team like they belong. They can beat teams in the NCAA tournament. They have the firepower, particularly offensively, and they can play defense when they put their minds to it, to actually win a game, or maybe two in the NCAA tournament. So if they just get in, it could be a fun ride. Things could happen, or they could not. They could lose in the first weekend. You really never know with this team. It just depends who shows up. Depends how hot Chase Fisher is, maybe. But it will be fun to watch.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I completely agree in the sense that you do not want that 8-9 seed, because then you play in the 1, and it's a fun prospect if you win that game, and then it's really a very enjoyable thing because you're ruining everyone's brackets and your team is advancing as a Cinderella, but likelihood of that happening, not too high. Key thing that we didn't mention, Steve, I'm not sure why you didn't bring this up yet, but biggest difference between last year's team and this year's team is obviously Matt Carlino. He's not here to carry the way and play those point guard minutes with Casey out. So,
well, Matt Carlino may be playing his last collegiate game tomorrow night in the Big East tournament at Madison Square Garden against Seton Hall, 7 o'clock Eastern Time, Fox Sports 1. If all y'all BYU fans want to tune in, I will not be present, but I will be there in the Garden in spirit.
That you will. So. But yeah, I'm intrigued with the potential matchup. The funniest one, and this has been bouncing around on Twitter, is in the first 4 matchup, if BYU is the 65th seed, they would potentially be playing against Texas. And there's a few Texas fans that are just like, what? BYU again? And it was funny because I was in Austin a couple weeks ago. I was actually in Austin in the same hotel when BYU beat Texas down in Austin. I was staying at the same hotel the night that BYU beat Gonzaga. So anytime BYU is playing in a very important basketball game, I'm going to go back to that same hotel. But it was interesting in talking with people down there and mentioning, that I was a BYU fan or something like that. Like we were in a restaurant and they're playing the Arizona Utah game. I'm like, hey, can you switch it to ESPN2? Actually, we would like to watch the BYU game. And they're just like, sure, we can do that for you. The BYU game, why not? So they did it a little begrudgingly, but they did it. So I think that'd be fun. I think that'd be a fun matchup. And we obviously played Texas last year. Tyler Haws knows them well. So I think that'd be an intriguing play-in game. I don't know how everyone feels about the play-in game. It's kind of fun because it's the very first game of the tournament. A lot of attention on this game specifically. So who knows? We'll see.
Yeah, I actually tweeted about a Texas matchup possibility in the first 4 a couple days ago, and I got a response from a random person who doesn't follow me, obviously a Texas fan who probably has a TweetDeck column up with Texas on it, and he's like, I asked what would happen if Texas and BYU played in the first 4, and he wrote back, he's like, Texas would kill BYU and just like we always do, or something like that. And I was like, were you in a coma for the last 3 years of athletic events? Because we haven't lost to Texas in a long time. So I just from a psychological perspective, I would love to play Texas. They're really talented and they have really good players and individual talent. But Rick Barnes' teams always crap the bed when it comes to winning time. So I would love to see it, and I would love to see Tyler recreate that insane running 3-pointer from the corner that he had, and with about 30 seconds left against Texas, which essentially sealed the game. Which I think is the single best shot in Tyler Haws' career that everybody forgets about. They always say, "Oh, Tyler Haws never makes it when it matters. He's not clutch." And they forgot the absolutely insane shot that he made, which wasn't technically a game-winning shot because they were up 1 when he did it. But it's an absolutely insane clutch shot that got BYU what was last year. That was their premier victory. That was it on the resume. That was the big one.
In my head, that's the Tyler Haws game. If I'm gonna I think if there's one game that I would say 20 years from now, and people are like, tell me about Tyler Haws, and I'd say, okay, you're going to watch one game. I would probably put him on the Texas game that they won neutral site last year. I think that's probably his kind of quintessential game. I just want to throw one thing at you guys. BYU's only won 1 game when they've been a 9 seed or lower in the history. Actually, that's correct. Yep, 1 game as a 9 seed or lower. I think they're 1-17. When they've had a low seeding like that. So seeding matters, and when they've had a higher seed, they've done a lot better, of course, right? And so I am a little nervous that that come tournament time, for whatever reason, you are playing really good teams, but the magic, the Cinderella stuff, it's like we used all the goodwill with Danny Ainge. It's like we blew all the magic at that one time. But anyway, okay, a couple Twitter questions that I also was able to find here. Get back to actually. Oh, so we talked about it briefly. But here's a good one. This is from Pat H. at Crazy Cougar Fanatic. Would Winder have made a difference? Will we ever see a tournament win again? What's up with the ref? Who shot Kennedy? Let's start with who shot Kennedy. I think that's the most interesting one.
Frank Bartley.
It's definitely Frank Bartley.
Is his aim good enough?
Maybe not. If Bartley was the one who tried to shoot Kennedy, he would have dropped the gun out the window of the gun depository. That's what would have happened.
That's what it was. It was an accident. He dropped it out the window. Yeah, so that's what it was. And then there was also someone else also, because the two direct angles. If I learned anything from Seinfeld, the bullet cannot redirect itself and then go backwards. So
right.
There were definitely two.
Wouldn't he have just tried to drive straight on into the convertible?
Well, yes, that's very true. Maybe Frank was on the grassy knoll, and he saw the convertible coming, and it was standing right in the way, and he felt like he needed to charge it head on, and then he tripped and accidentally shot the president with his gun. I don't know. It's my best option.
Hey, one other thing I wanted to get to, and Kyle Collinsworth tonight. I mean, how outstanding was he? Obviously, the 9 for 22. He had to take all those shots with Tyler Haws getting in foul trouble. But boy, 28 points tonight, 8 rebounds. That was, I mean, in terms of scoring, that was really a kind of a new thing we saw out of Kyle Collinsworth tonight. We haven't really seen him kind of shoulder the scoring burden like that, and he did it.
Yeah, I think this was actually the most interesting storyline, beyond the main storyline coming out of this game, was what I think what we saw tonight was essentially a preview of what Kyle Collinsworth's season looks like next year as the main guy on this BYU team without Tyler Haws. I mean, he'll have other options. He'll have Chase Fisher, he'll have Nick Emery, but Kyle's going to be the guy, and he's going to have to shoulder a lot more of the offensive load. And Kyle actually showed me, he made me more confident tonight that he could do that. Kyle stepped out and hit some mid-range jump shots, and that's something we haven't seen him do consistently at all this year. And so any glimpse that he can do that, and that's potentially a thing he can develop in his arsenal, if Kyle can figure out how to shoot that mid-range jumper consistently and make it consistently next year, look out, because the guy goes to the rim like crazy, he rebounds like crazy, he sets up his teammates like crazy. The one thing that Kyle Collinsworth is missing is a functional jump shot. He just has not had it, and he had it tonight, and it looked good. His form looked good. He shot it confidently. So if he can do that next year and build on that and maybe extend that range out to the three-point line and be a respectable deep threat, it could be a whole lot of fun to watch him, and it could really help his NBA candidacy as an NBA prospect. The one thing from all the scouts I talked to when I was out in Maui, the one thing that they said was Kyle Collinsworth is an amazing athlete. He has the NBA body. He could be an NBA player if he could only shoot. So if he can figure that out over the summer, if he can develop that mid-range game, maybe stretch it out to the three-point line, that could be a really great thing for Kyle and a really great thing for BYU, because he is going to have to carry a lot of the load next year.
Yeah. No, if I can develop my church game three-point shot and I can make at least one of two of those shots a game, I mean, Kyle Collinsworth, the kid who's getting an education to play basketball at BYU, I think he can develop his shot like this, and that's nice because I think he spent so much of his time last year rehabbing his knee and just like pouring deer antler juice all over that thing. I think that he can have at least a few more moments, and I think the biggest thing, he's also practicing his free throws. I think he was. More than anything, I think he was trying to heal up and then just practice his free throws, which he's done. He's done so much better this year in that department. So, I mean, it's great. He's going to be back here for another year, and he's going to be able to, learn how to make those jump shots. So I'm excited. I'm excited for that, and it's going to be an interesting team next year. But we still have this one. And I'm curious to see if he starts using that a little bit more. We saw him kind of later towards the season start to, make those jump shots and even more importantly take them, because before they would just kind of like pull away and then pass out of that. But now there are a few times he kind of like, instead of charging hard, he kind of step back, take a dribble, and shoot. So I'm curious to see in this next game, if it's in the NIT or in the NCAA tournament, if he does start to employ that a little bit more. If it was, obviously, is out of necessity tonight, but if he's going to come out in the next game and maybe, start to tickling the twine from outside.
That's really the missing piece of the game, right, for the Russell Westbrook comparison, which ESPN has been running all day on SportsCenter today with every BYU highlight package, the side-by-side comparison of Kyle Collinsworth to Russell Westbrook, because they're both on an insane triple-double tear right now. And considering Russell Westbrook is my favorite basketball player, not named Matt Carlino, ever, I've been personally very much enjoying that. But the one thing that, and they do have a very similar game, it's not a bad comparison, except for maybe Russell is 10 times quicker and has 10 inches on his vertical. But the other thing that Russell has is Russell is a great mid-range jump shooter. And he wasn't that way in college at UCLA. He made himself into that type of player through a lot of hard work in the pros. Kyle could do the same thing with a really good summer now with his knee healthy. He could really build himself into a good mid-range jump shooter, and that would really add another facet to his game that would make him even more dangerous, which is a little scary to think about if you're planning on playing BYU next year.
Yep.
One of the things that I've been surprised at as I've talked to people about the BYU basketball team concerning Kyle Collinsworth, anybody that's older than the age of 45 always invariably asks me, is Collinsworth going to be back next year? And
of course he is.
And I think
he's going to be.
But I think it's interesting that it's just kind of old school thinking. If you get 6 triple doubles, of course somebody's going to draft you. And It's just an interesting. Anyway. Anyway, I just think it's funny. You get it all the time from some of the older fans when they talk to you. Have you guys had that happen to you ever?
Yeah, and it seems like it's not just older fans. It's like people on Twitter sometimes like, oh well, if Collinsworth comes back next year, if he's around. And that is, I think you're right. It's a little bit of old school thing, because in the past, like, you break a big NCAA record like that. In the pre-analytics era, in the pre-era of everybody watches every game and there's not a whole lot of scout tape on you. Maybe you do just get to go to the pros early and someone takes a flyer on you and thinks, hey, this guy's a really great college player, maybe he'll work in the pros. But, I mean, NBA teams are a lot more sophisticated on scouting and things like that now. That doesn't mean they don't make incredibly terrible decisions because the Minnesota Timberwolves still exist, as do the Sacramento Kings. But a guy like Kyle Collinsworth, I mean, teams look at him and they see a huge spacing problem, because the biggest thing in the NBA right now is you have to be able to space the floor. It's all about three-point shooting. That's what analytics has taught us, and it's either layups or three-point shooting. If you can't do the three-point shooting as a guard, which Kyle Collinsworth will be a point guard in the NBA, if you can't make opponent guard you out on the three-point line and force him to respect you, you don't have a place on the NBA, because all that means is you're just going to junk up the rest of the team's spacing, and they're going to send your guy to go double the superstar. So, yeah, if Kyle has a lot of tools that would be good on an NBA team, but if he can't shoot the three as a guard, it's not going to make it. So hopefully he can develop that, and there's a lot of time, and that's something that can be learned, which is something that's great. And I know he's an incredibly hard worker, and I know he'll put the time in. Just a question of how quickly can he develop that skill set, because it's going to be absolutely crucial.
It's funny, we had briefly discussed this the other night before before we weren't recording on this lovely three-man weave, but I mentioned this analogy, and Steve, you'll be hearing this for the first time, but it's interesting because you hear of these players when they first come to BYU. We see these kids from high school and we're constantly discussing things about them and saying, oh man, are they going to come to BYU? Is Kyle Collinsworth going to go to UVA, or is he going to go to UCLA? I don't know. And then he gets there and it's like, is he going to start? Is he going to start as a freshman? He gets back from is he going to play point guard? Is he good enough to play point guard? There's this like perpetual discussion of what happens next. It's kind of like me in my dating life, where I go on a date with someone, and after one date, someone will be like, so, how's it going? Are you guys going to go on another date? Do you like her? Do you think you could fall in love with her? Could you see yourself having children with this person? and just kind of like, whoa, hey, that's like cart before the horse kind of thing. And it's like, then I go on a third date, and it's like, are you in love? Are you ready to propose to this person? And so I keep on telling myself, you just gotta let it happen organically. If it happens, great. If it doesn't, don't need to force the issue. So I feel the same way about my BYU athletes in the sense that I'm not gonna push them out into this idea of him going to the NBA until that actually becomes a reality. And as of right now, he's just been on a few dates. There's nothing serious about it. So if he starts talking proposals and agents and stuff like that, then maybe we'll get serious and we'll start talking about that. But as of right now, he's still staying here.
So what you're saying, Jake, is we should just really live in this very special moment that we have with Kyle Collinsworth and appreciate the really great makeouts that we've been having together.
Exactly.
Good.
Yes.
I wanted to make sure I read the analogy right.
I believe people in Provo refer to them by a certain acronym, which I'm not going to say.
I see us as committed to Kyle Collinsworth and he to us. So they're no longer a NICMO, Jake.
Okay. It's a
fully committed makeout. It's a FICMO.
Oh. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I'm 100%.
Fully invested makeout, maybe?
Yeah.
A FIMO? Fully invested? I think that's a BYU football thing, if I remember correctly.
Fully invested, a FIMO. I can get behind that.
FIMO? I don't know. You're the advertising guy. You figure it out.
I'll brand this, and I'll figure a way to start spreading it across the world and changing the minds of America.
Amazing. This is even better than our Nelly conversation the other night.
You're darn right it is.
All right. Well, BYU finally they get creamed. They haven't been. Everyone's kind of had that as a badge of honor all year. 16-point loss, and I do want to talk though. Are these guys ever going to win a conference tournament? Like, what is going on here? At what point do we gotta make sacrifices? At what point do we? I mean, what do we have to do to win a tournament?
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that BYU will win a conference tournament in 2000 and let's say 2018. 2018, when you've got the full complement of the future of the program, which we are always ever looking forward to, which seems to never come. When you have your Nick Emerys and your Eric Mikas and your TJ Hawes and your Peyton Dastrups and maybe not your Frank Jacksons, but you never know. And I think BYU is going to get over the hump. I don't know what the issue has been in the Dave Rose era to this point. I think playing in Vegas and then with UNLV present in the Mountain West Conference for a long time was a big problem. You're essentially playing a road game. And I don't know what the deal's been with the WCC. I guess it's just that Gonzaga is really good, and Gonzaga will probably always be really good. But Dave Rose is a very good coach. We saw that this year. We've seen that over the past month and a half. He's totally remade this BYU team that a month and a half ago looked like they were completely lost and the season was over for all intents and purposes. So Dave Rose is a great coach. He's a great recruiter. He's got great talent coming in. He knows how to use that talent. So I wouldn't expect that this drought would last too much longer. I think in the next 2 or 3 years, depending on how things work out, balls bounce the right way, I would expect BYU to break that drought.
I think one of the things that, of course, you got to be hopeful. One of the things I worry about is I know we've had some good recruiting classes, but
don't use that word.
Are the expectations already too high for these guys? Like, I already kind of feel like if they're not an Elite Eight team, people will see this group as like a failure. And this will be the last thing we get to tonight. But let's talk. I mean, are we already unfairly putting these guys to a spot where if they don't advance far in the tournament, if they don't make a Sweet 16 or challenge for an Elite Eight, we're going to look at this era or this opportunity with these guys as sort of disappointing. And the reason that I want to bring it up is I don't know if that's fair because BYU's only made a Sweet 16 if they've had the National Player of the Year on their team. And so my whole thing is maybe are we getting a little too far ahead and should we let these guys develop and grow on their own terms?
Maybe. I mean, yeah. I mean, BYU fans with unreasonable expectations for future success. That's never happened before. So yeah, we probably do have two unrealistic expectations of a group of guys where three of them have never played college basketball yet. They're all out, except for the exception of Nick Emery. They're all still wearing missionary tags every day and not playing any basketball pretty much at all. So yes, any expectation or feeling that this will be disappointing if they don't go to the Final Four or whatever is probably a little far-fetched. At the same time, BYU fans have a reason to be legitimately excited because, as you mentioned, Keith, yes, we've never been to a Sweet 16 without the National Player of the Year, but those teams were so reliant on those National Players of the Year, and they didn't have, I don't think, the full complement of depth that this team could have. It was Jimmer and, Jackson Emery is a good player, and Brandon Davies is a good player, but those were nice three-star guys coming out of high school, and they turned themselves into really good players. Noah Hartsock, same thing. But there wasn't.
This team had 3 NBA players on it.
Yeah, there wasn't the depth of talent. I mean, we're talking about 4 top 100 recruits in a 2-year span. That's something that BYU has never had. And so I think it could be different. I think that they'll have to learn to play defense, which obviously we know BYU doesn't like to do very much. But I do think this is a little bit of a different situation. So I think there's a reason to be excited, and BYU fans should be excited. It should be forward-looking. And I do think there's a good reason for that. But at the same time, yes, let's not overburden these kids with expectations and then scapegoat them and kill them when they don't live up to them fully like we do with former point guards who have now transferred away.
Yes, I don't even know how to start this conversation because I just like Steve said, I mean, BYU fans have never had astronomical expectations, particularly for the football team. That's never happened. And for the basketball team, no, that's never happened either. So, I mean, I'm not worried about it. I mean, I think we'll be fine. But no, it's in all seriousness, it's so. I mean, it just kind of goes back to the last conversation that we're having. It's going from a point where even before these guys step on campus, it's like there's going to be some think piece on some blog, maybe even ours, where it says, is the 2017, 2018 going to be the best BYU basketball team ever? Read here, kind of thing. And so people are already going to be having those discussions and saying those things. And you know what? Let that happen. I'm just going to, when that time comes, I'm going to enjoy that basketball team for what it is. And I'm not going to personally try not to contribute to the hype that much in saying, oh man, can't wait for 2017 when so-and-so and so-so is going to be here and we're going to win everything. Because that's not going to happen because Gonzaga will probably still be a very good basketball team in that year. And there's going to be other very good basketball teams that year. And something's going to happen. Someone's going to get injured. Someone might transfer. That's the thing. We don't know all of the things that could potentially happen. So, sure, on paper, as of right now, it looks great. But paper does not lead to championships. So,
unless it's money, then it always leads to championships.
That's right. That's what that's Jim Boeheim. He knows all about that.
Jimmy B, baby. Jimmy B.
One thing, though, the basketball team seems to kind of actually fulfill expectations sometimes. We heard about Corbin Kaufusi being this difference maker. I think he has been that. I think Chase Fisher, we heard all this hype, and he's kind of lived up to some of that. So maybe basketball can buck the trend that we seem to find ourselves disappointed by expectations necessarily with football. I don't know. We'll find out. It's exciting time. Selection Sunday is coming our way. We'll be back with you again, I'm sure, after their game on Thursday because we're going to think positively they're going to get in the field. Last thoughts, fellas.
Oh, cross your fingers and pray for a good matchup. I mean, I think BYU's in the field. I don't feel much lack of confidence about that, no matter what Joe Lunardi or Jerry Palm say in their crystal ball. I think BYU will be in the field. I think they're definitely a tournament team. I think they're a tournament team that can win games in the NCAA tournament. It's all going to depend on the matchup. If they get the right matchup and they start hitting their shots in the first half and things start rolling the right way, could be a real fun ride in March. So keep your fingers crossed, keep praying, and keep watching.
Yeah. I got one thing. I'm going to borrow a prop here from the church building that I'm in, and for this next weekend, BYU fans should be focused on one thing. That is this: it's chalk. Hopefully, in all these conference tournaments, all the top seeds win. The Dukes. That they win all the way through and they win their conference tournaments. We do not want Penn State. We do not want Northwestern sneaking in the tournament because that means bad things for BYU. So if you're going to do anything in this next coming week, just pray for good juju for all those top-ranked teams in the conference tournaments.
And pray for Skylar Halford's bruised nerve leg or whatever.
Yes.
Because that is also a thing we should pray for most heavily.
And for Frank Bartley to get the ability to dribble the basketball back.
Like at the end of Space Jam.
Yes. Because Sean Bradley got his talents back. Why can't he? Why can't Frank Bartley?
Left of those talents, yes, he did get those back.
That he did.
That's it for the three-man weave. For Jake and Steve, I'm Keith. Thanks for watching.
See you later, everybody.